Hi everyone, how are you doing today? I'm very excited to be here with you. My name is Ellen and I'm the co-founder and the creative director of zero waste knitwear brand The Endery. And I'm very excited because today I'm going to be showing you how to mend a jumper, a sweater, using dead stock and leftover scrap yarns. So hopefully we're going to get to that in a little bit, but first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about The Endery and what we do. So we are a zero waste knitwear brand founded in 2018, so a couple of years ago. And it's myself and Kelly Finissier, who's my business partner. And we make all of our knits in Lima, Peru, by hand, using traditional techniques. And for all of our knits, we use repurposed yarns. And this means dead stock, which is an industry term which refers to leftovers at the end of production processes. So Kelly and I have both worked in knitwear manufacturing for a good number of years, and we saw a huge opportunity in all of the leftovers that were available in Lima, Peru, and left over at the end of these production processes. And Peru is just the most fantastic place for textiles. It's the most fantastic place for artisans. It's very famous for its fibers. And we were very, very lucky enough to be there and to see a real opportunity in using these dead stock materials and our leftover knitters and our knitters to use these leftovers in for our collections. So we started developing collections made from these leftovers in alpaca and Pima cotton, and we had a really positive and great response to that. So we feel like we're an ethical knitwear brand in the fact that we have a social impact with the knitters that we use in our workshops in Lima, Peru, and then also with the environmental issues surrounding waste, overconsumption, disposability in the fashion industry. And we feel like we're kind of tackling both of those areas. And we're just really passionate about what we do, and it's very challenging. And then how did we get started with visible mending? That's a great question. And it's something that came to us while we were developing the brand, actually. So we thought that it would be really cool if we could send out little packs of yarns with each of our sweaters to all of our customers in case they got a hole. And then for one reason or another, we didn't develop that in the beginning, but we came back to this idea in March 2020 in the first lockdown. When I was in New York, I'm currently in the UK, but we run the brand from New York. And I was seeing such a huge trend and need for people to connect online, and also people using craft as a way to kind of alleviate stress and alleviate tension. And there was so much anxiety at the time to do with the pandemic and to do with climate change. And repairing and caring for your knits is a way to really slow down and bring in a more kind of ethical, slower, and more conscious way of approaching your clothing. So instead of throwing it away and knits, kind of being tossed out and put in landfills, repairing and mending is a way to really tackle disposability and giving it a new life with new color. And especially if you've got a beautiful knit that's been made by hand in premium materials, you want to take care of it. And it's a really great excuse to get creative and to customize as well. So you don't always need these repairing techniques to repair a hole. You can use them for customization as well. And this idea I explored in my first Domestika course, which was launched just a month ago. And I'm very, very excited to have it out and see everyone's response to it and just how important mending has become. Mending is becoming this huge statement about disposability and anti-fast fashion. So you kind of wear your visible mends with pride as a way to say, I'm not throwing this away. I'm not prepared to kind of invest in cheap clothing, and I want to take care of what I already own. And visible mending is a really beautiful, creative way to do that. So I'm really excited to be part of this kind of contemporary mending conversation. And the Endery is a big part of what we do is the aftercare and the repairing of our knits. So in March 2020, we developed our mending kit, which I'm going to show you now. We developed our first mending kit and it sold out really quickly and people loved it. And in this kit, you can get kind of all the basics that you need to start mending. So we have some leftover yarns, and I'm going to talk about yarns in a bit more detail soon, but we have some alpaca and some cotton, and these are actually leftovers from our collection. So they're the leftovers of the leftovers. So we're really using up all the odds ends that we can find and making sure that everything is repurposed that we can find. So this kit is really great for anyone who's starting out. These are available on our website, and you get it with kind of needles and also clippers, so you can start repairing and visibly mending your knits as well. And I think it's important to mention as well about color with the Enderie. So we're a very colorful brand. We love color. We feel like color is therapeutic, color is healing, it's exciting, it's energizing. And that was actually by accident that we became this really colorful brand, because when we're talking about dead stock, it's actually very hard to find colors that are similar or are the same or in the same fiber or the same weight. So what you end up with using is a lot of different colors from different leftovers. And so we couldn't really be choosy about the colors that we wanted to use in our collection, which is so different and unconventional to the normal design process. So normally you design a palette, you create the yarns from that, and then you make a collection. So what we ended up with, all these different yarns that didn't really go together. So we had to figure out a way for it all to look cohesive and beautiful together. And we just thought, why not? We're just going to make it really, really colorful and really bold. And the same with visible mending. There's no real right or wrong way to approach color. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how I approach my color palettes and what I feel like always looks good no matter what. So yeah, color is a really big thing that we're about, as is knitting and mending and using recycled materials. So I'm going to jump in and start talking to you about what you need today to do some mending with me. So first of all, I'm going to talk about needles. So needles are really important because this is a different type of needle than you'd use for sewing. It's a blunt, thick needle, and it doesn't have a spiky kind of pointy end. And it has a very large eye at the top, if you can see. So the eye is so that you can fit yarn through it. So when we mend knitwear, we don't use cotton as you would to sew something. We use yarn. We use yarn that we would use for knitting. So like this, for example. So this is a size 18 tapestry needle, but a size 22 is also fine. And I think with most mending projects, you'll be able to use this. And I use this for mostly everything, but you can also get different types of much longer darning needles as well, but I like a shorter one personally. So you just need to make sure that it's blunt, because we don't actually do any sewing when we're mending, we just do a kind of weaving. The next thing I'm going to talk to you about is yarns. So this is one of my favorite topics. As you can see, I just showed you some alpaca here, which is really beautiful. It's really soft. And here I have some of my favorite colors in different types of fibers. And I have a huge collection of these. And as you can see, we've got like oranges, we've got this teal blue, we've got a pale pink, and this is a cotton. And this is an alpaca, and a couple of wools here as well. So these are offcuts from our collections, and they're also kind of old bits of yarn that I've had for a number of years that I want to use up. So when I'm mending, I try not to buy anything new. I just try and use repurposed yarns where possible. And because of that, we can't be that choosy about the color palette. When mending, it's always really important that you kind of try and match fibers where possible. So if you have a woolen jumper, it's always really great to mend in wool, because this is the same fiber. There's also a really good idea to mend in cotton. You can actually combine these two fibers and make a really beautiful texture as well. And if you're mending with socks, socks are great things to mend. I would recommend using cotton, because this is more easy care and it can go in the washing machine. At the end of this session, I'm going to show you and talk to you a little bit more about knitwear care, so like washing your knits. I'm going to come back to this at the end. But yes, like I say, it's a really good idea to match fibers. So here, these beautiful alpaca yarns are going to look really nice together, like so. So I'm going to use these yarns in my mending today, but it's also really important for you to take a look at the sweater that I'm going to be mending, because you're going to see what kind of weight it is. And this is really important when you're choosing your materials. Here you can see the sweater that I'm using. And unfortunately, the moths have eaten it completely. It's like a beige wool. It's not fine, but it's fairly fine knit. It's not very chunky. And then here in the armpit as well, there's a hole here and a hole here. It's basically covered in holes because it's a vintage knit. So when we're talking about mending, it's really great to repair something that already exists in your wardrobe or your closet, but also you can mend something that you can find in a secondhand shop, in a thrift store. So if you go out on a mission and you want to find something, that's also a really fun project and a great way to kind of revive old knits. And I've done that a lot for people in my life for like Christmas presents. I've bought secondhand knits and kind of upcycled them and given them for presents. So as you can see here, the yarn here is quite thin that they've used. So I wouldn't go for anything too chunky. For example, this yarn I would say is too thick to mend on this sweater. So what you want is a yarn that's a similar weight or lighter, because this will make your knits look more kind of refined. Like I would say this would kind of be perfect here. If you can see, I'll just hold that up for you. That's kind of perfect. It's a great weight. So you do really need to think about what kind of yarn you're going to use before you start your project. And a good way to also look at this is through colour. So here we have a beige knit, which is quite a plain neutral colour. It's not a colour that I'm actually that crazy about, so I'm really excited to use some bold colour here to really liven it up. If I wanted to do invisible mending, I could use something like this. This is almost exactly the right colour for this, but I don't want to do visible mending. I don't want to do invisible mending, sorry. I want to do visible mending because I want to call out the mend and I want to celebrate the fact that it's old, it's worn, and I'm repairing it. So I think that when I approach color, I also have some color chips that I use and I play around with. And this is a great way to start building your palette. So taking a small sample of the colors that you have on hand and having a look at what they look like. Like I'm not too fond of very soft colors together. And in the Endery, we never really use that as a color concept. We like to create very vivid, bright color palettes and then mix maybe one or two softer or neutral colors in there. So this for me, this pink here would be too soft with this. I think it's just too girly for me. I would definitely mix it up with something a lot bolder, and I much prefer the orange. Actually, I think I'm going to use this orange today because I think the alpaca is going to look really, really great with this knit. And I'm going to do two different types of mends. I'm going to do two very simple mends, but I'm going to show you two different finishing techniques on both. So here we have the orange, and I think I'm going to choose the green. But like I say, you can use these color chips to play around with, and that's really good way to get started. So here I have some clippers as well, but you can obviously use any scissors you have at home. The good thing about these is that they're very small and they can really get in the small kind of details of the knit. So if you have some of these, that's perfect, but it's not necessary. And then finally, you really need, for your mending project, you need a hard curved surface to mend on. So I'm going to show you here a great darning tool, which is a darning egg. I bought this from eBay and it has like a flat, hard surface. And then this is basically something that you put underneath to make sure you get the correct tension. You never ever mend without anything on underneath unless you're experienced and you can do it yourself, because as you can see, the hole can get bigger. Knits have a lot of elasticity in them. So what you don't want to happen is to pull it too much out of shape. And a mending tool like this really, really helps. So this is designed specifically for mending. So another tool, and this is something I'm absolutely crazy about, is this vintage darning mushroom. I think it's from the 70s, but I found it on eBay. And this is a really great tool because this is something that you mend on here. So this would go underneath here. And you would use it as a surface to mend on that keeps your knit in place. But the best thing about this mushroom is that inside you can store your needles as well. So this is like my personal best collection of needles that I have, and it's portable and it's really cool, and I just love the color. So this is great. You can find these on eBay, and it's definitely worth getting into all the cool darning tools if it's something you're really interested in. But if you don't have a mushroom or an egg, don't worry too much, because you can also use a glass. The only thing with the glass is that it has to be hard and it has to be made of glass, because you don't want it to be made out of plastic. well, you don't really want anything to be made out of plastic. But as you can see here, this acts in a completely the same way as the darning tools. So this is a really great substitute. And here too, an apple also works. So an apple can also be fit in here really easily and work in exactly the same way. So the Endery is all about repurposing, using tools that you have on hand, yarns that you have on hand. Try not to buy anything new. And this is a great way to use repurposed materials in your home. And here, I think I'm going to use a glass for this one to show you how easy it is to use this. And what I'm going to do to start is I'm just going to check out the hole and maybe tidy it up a bit. Sometimes you have like little bits of yarns that fly away towards the edges, and I would just snip those away. So the first step is just to kind of prepare the hole, make sure that it's neat, and make sure that it's not pulled. So don't worry about holding it too tight, but just place it directly over the glass. And I'm going to go in, I'm going to cut my first colour of yarn, which is this one here. I'm going to use this beautiful orange because I'm crazy about orange, and it's like a big trend colour as well this season. And I just think it always looks great. I love warm colours. And what you want to do with this yarn is you cut a long thread. Don't cut it short because you need a long tail on each side. So pull a long way through and leave a long tail. So you should have quite a long piece of yarn, and you don't need to put a knot at the end. That's the key. Don't need a knot at the end like you would do with an embroidery project or another type of sewing project. Then you thread your needle and you come about, I would say, 1 centimetre away at the bottom right corner. That's where you want to be starting to do your mend. So what you do, first of all, is you do the horizontal stitches. I'm going to show you how to do that, but you want to go far away from the hole, because if you go too close, you're going to pull these threads. So what I would do is, if you want to start here, you want to come in here and then come out the side. And you leave the long tail here. You leave the long tail. This has actually got a knot in it, so I don't know how good it's actually going to be. I'm just going to pull that through. So as you can see here, I don't know if you can see, but I have a long tail over the other side. And you leave that. So this is going to be something we will tidy up at the end, this long tail. And you have your lovely yarn here. And what you're going to do is you're going to make a line and you're going to go up at the top. This knot is going to really annoy me, I can tell now. Okay, so that's your first stitch. What you do is you go through and then you go through the top here. And to secure it, I'm going to do a couple of extra stitches right at the top. Like so. And I think this also just looks really pretty. I like the mending when it looks, I don't know, like kind of childlike and interesting. I don't like it when it looks too neat. And then we go back down. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be weaving in and out like so. You're just literally going in between the knit stitches. Like so. As you can see, I'm on my next vertical line, and I'm going to stop here and I'm going to go all the way across to cover the hole. But when I'm on this side, I'm going to secure it by doing a running stitch. So the stitch that goes in and out is a running stitch. I've got a knot in my yarn, which is really annoying me. Okay, so I go back again. And like I say, this is like a basic idea of a mend, but there's really many different variations on this that you can do. And the most important thing here is that you don't pull too tight. So these stitches should not be pulling the hole together. The whole idea here is not that you want to be closing the hole and sewing it together. You want to be creating a nice texture. So sometimes you might want to pull this slightly just to make sure you get the correct tension. And then going up to the other side again. Like so. As you can see, I'm getting a few really nice stitches here. And I'm going to go up and across. I've done my running stitch on either side. And already it's kind of taking shape, and my mend is going to look cool. And the moths have had a wonderful time here, just munching away. I'm going to go through. Just make sure you use your glass underneath properly as a tool, because that's what it's there for. You don't do this kind of like freehand and with no background, especially if you're a beginner. All you beginner menders out there, make sure you find a good tool to mend on. Okay, I'm going to go, again, don't go too close to the edge here, because that can pull. So as you can see here, I've got some really nice threads, and these don't have to be too close together. Can you see I haven't put them too close together? I used to try and fit them very, very close together to make a very, very tight weave, but you don't actually need that. You can have them far apart, and it's actually easier to do it like that. And then here too. So that one's a little bit loose because I had that annoying knot at the end. So just make sure you pull it too, and I can finish that at the end. I'm sure it will be fine. The whole idea of mending is that you're celebrating imperfections, and you're celebrating things that are considered to be old and broken and giving them new life, so that it doesn't have to be perfect. And many menders have very different styles when they're doing their projects. So it's all about practicing and finding what works for you and what you like. I love to mend an alpaca just because I love alpaca. And I think it's the best fiber out there because it's very green alpaca fiber. So as you can see, I've finished here. Basically the whole is covered, but I might just do one more. I might just do one more on this side. And I've done my running stitch, which I think also looks really cute. So I'm actually going to come off now. So how to finish on this side, you do the same as you did it over here. I don't know if you can see. And you basically come out, so you do one last stitch, and then you come off further away. So pull it through. And you should have a long tail on this side that has no knot in the end. So now you have two. And what you can do is you can go in and just kind of make sure that it has the right kind of feeling to it. And don't worry too much if they're too loose. It's better to be too loose than too tight at this stage. So now I'm going to go in with my second color. And my second color, I'm going to use this beautiful green because I'm like such a big green fan and I think it looks good with everything. Like I say, if you have a neutral base, you can really play with the color. And I love really saturated bright colors because I think it always looks fresh and unique and interesting. So I'm going to take some of this yarn, and I use this for a lot of my darning projects, my mending projects. And I'm going to snip again a really long thread so that you have enough to keep the sides going. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do the horizontal lines going across, stitches. And again, we start from the bottom right, but if you were left-handed, you do everything from this side over. So we're starting always in this bottom right corner. And I'm going to go far away and then I'm going to come closer. And again, don't go too close to the hole. So I want to start right here at the bottom. And I just want to make sure you can see this properly. This is like the long string. Just going to make sure you've got a really good view of what I'm doing here. Okay, so now we're going to do our horizontal lines, and what we do here is we make a weaving texture by going over and under each of our threads. So as you can see, I've gone over, and so I've gone over, under, over, under, over, under, over, right? And I pull that through. And I make sure that it lies really flat at the bottom of my mend. So I'm pretty pleased with that. And once I've done that, I secure it by doing a running stitch again. So it's quite fiddly work, but it's really fun. I'm actually having loads of fun doing this. So that's good. And again, make sure your tension's okay. Pull this side through if you need it. That's what it's there for. And again, we're going to go back. But this time, we go the opposite way. So come out your other side. So I've done my running stitch now. And instead of going over, so this one is over, I go under. And this one, I go over. Under, I'm going opposite. And then over and under. Over and under. And as you can see here, it's starting to look like it's building a really nice texture on the top. And I'm actually really happy with it so far. Do my running stitch on either side to secure it. And you don't actually have to do this running stitch either side. You can do something a lot more kind of standard that isn't kind of running over each side. But I do think it looks cool like this. I'm going to come out now. So remember, if I went under this one, then I'm going over this one. Like so. I'm going to catch the other side. And remember, we're not actually sewing our knits. We're not going underneath and sewing it together. We're actually just weaving in the ends, which is a much different kind of process. We have to make sure all of our stitches lie flat together. As you can see, it's starting to look pretty cool. And this is like a two-tone variation. I really like to use as much color as possible with my men's, because I think it always looks great. And every time you wear something that is mended, people always comment on it. So this one is under and over, under and over, and over. So again, this should always be the opposite way to the line before. And this one's, yeah, just make sure it pulls down nicely. Yeah, that's looking good. I'm going to go back again. I'm going to do my running stitch. So I'm mixing here wool and alpaca, and as you can see, the textures are completely different, but I think they complement each other beautifully. And you might think that I'm crazy for doing a kind of winter knit right now, but I am English and it's still really cold here. So I'm still in winter jumpers, guys. I don't know about you, where you're from or what kind of knits you're in right now, but in England, we wear our winter jumpers pretty late in the year. But I think summer jumpers are always going to be great in cotton. So cotton's a really nice fiber to mend with as well. So as you can see here, it's building up nicely. I'm making a completely new kind of fabric to go on top of the hole in my jumper. The best thing about mending as well is that it's actually not that difficult to learn. People get very kind of nervous and think that they're going to do it wrong. And one of the beautiful things about mending is it's just about finding your own style and learning the basics. And with that, you can really play with color. And I think color is just so healing and it's so beautiful to play with. And, you know, we've all had a pretty difficult year with being indoors and feeling, you know, kind of isolated and alone. And I think mending has been a key way that we've been able to communicate a lot with our customers and people that have, you know, questions about knitwear and how to look after it. Because if you spend money on a nice knit, you want to have it for many years, and we want you to have it for many years. This is, you know, we create lifelong knits. We don't want, you know, knits to last for 2 years and then they're thrown away. We don't want to think about, you know, our effect on the environment in terms of, you know, overconsumption and greediness. We want to kind of really respect the land, respect the planet, and respect the people that make it. Because a lot of time goes into making our knits, maybe a day and a half to make one knit. So that's a lot. I'm going to finish up by doing kind of one last row here, if I can just squeeze it in. So I'm going to go over and under and over and under and over and under and over. Yes, that looks great. So now I have a really nice little square mend on my jumper, and I'm going to finish it off in the same way that I've done every other one, which is to come away and kind of leave a long tail. So as you can see here, I'm going to take out my glass. I'm going to see what it looks like. Yeah. So that the main idea with your mend is that you want it to lie flat, because knits, like I say, knits have a lot of texture to them. So you want to keep your knit nice and flat here. And I think that looks pretty good, considering it has a hole in it. So you can still see the hole, but it's got like this really nice texture over the top. Which is orange and green. Okay, so how to finish. What you need to do is you need to bring all of your long ends to the back of the knit. So even if they are really long, I just recommend bringing them all through. I think that's the best way to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew them all into the back. So the back of your mend is really important as the front. So I'm going to bring that through. Can you see what I'm doing here? I'm just bringing through the long tail on this side. And I'm going to chuck in the yarn on this side. I'm going to do that with all four corners. So this corner has already been taken through. I'm going to take through this side. Again, I'm just going to pop it through. Make sure that it goes through. And then I'm going to tackle the underside. I'm going to show you how to do that as well. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, sometimes it's easy to get confused if you do the wrong kind of over-under pattern. Sometimes it's quite easy to do that incorrectly. And my advice is just to kind of, if you can undo it, undo it. If not, just keep going. It doesn't really matter too much. And like I say, the imperfection is all part of the beauty. So it doesn't have to look perfect. Ooh. Just seeing, okay, cool. So just making sure my camera looks good. I'm just going to move it over to the other side, and I'm going to show you how to finish it off. So I'm going to turn my knit inside out, and I can already see more holes in this. So this is like kind of going to be a big project, but I'm very excited about it. I'm just seeing all of your comments come through and where you're tuning in from Chile and Colombia. Hola. Yo también puedo hablar un poquito de español también, pero no puedo explicar bien cómo hacerlo. So we will do it in English. Sorry, guys. I hope you understand everything I'm saying. So for the other side, I'm going to show you how to finish this off. So as you can see, we've got all of our mend here. I'm going to take it and I'm going to weave it through very carefully in the same direction or the opposite direction, just to make that kind of square. And I pull it through. So this also needs to be, make sure it's flat. And if I were you, I would definitely use your mending tool on the other side again. Like this. And just kind of go around. It doesn't really matter too much. And then once you finish, you can kind of snip it off. I do tie a small knot at the end just to make sure it's really, really secure. Like so. Like that. and then I snip it really close to the end. So it's like that. So remember that this inside is going to be where you have your, you pull it over your head and you take it off. So it does have to be neat, and it has to be, it has to be non-irritating, because sometimes if you make a real mess on the back, it can be really uncomfortable to wear. So try and make it as flat as you can. So the same for this one. This one is another one of our long. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down this way with this one, and I'm just going to go in and out. And it doesn't matter if you pick up other stitches too, that will help secure it. So here, don't pull it too tight though, like me, because that will cause it to have the wrong tension and bunch up too much. Here we go, like so. And just go down a little bit further. And if you've got a really long tail, sometimes it is annoying, but it's definitely worth keeping it long. So this is all nicely secured in. I'm going to pull it through one last time. I wonder if anyone has any questions. I'm definitely going to move on to questions shortly. Maybe I can ask you if you have any questions right now. I was wondering if anyone can send me any of their questions while I'm just finishing up my mend. Do I have to wash my mended knits in a special way? That's a really good question. And washing and caring for your knits is a really important part of how we take care of them. So, for example, alpaca and wool always needs to be washed in cool water, and ideally on a hand wash. So I wouldn't really, if you have a beautiful knit that's like a high quality fiber, I wouldn't be putting it in the washing machine. Cotton, you can put in the washing machine, but anything like this, I would hand wash. But if you have a mend on top of it, again, and it's different fibers, I would definitely recommend hand washing it. So yes, I would just always hand wash. Hand washing is like the best thing ever. It's slow, it's thoughtful. I know it's kind of a little bit more inconvenient, but it helps you develop a closer relationship to your knits. It's really kind of therapeutic and calming to do it. And actually, your knits don't need to be washed that much. But if you have a cotton sweater, so like this cotton sweater that I'm wearing here, and you have a mend on it, I would say you could probably put that in the washing machine. But just be careful. Wool and alpaca, they are all delicate fibers. So don't take it to the dry cleaner. Don't put it in the washing machine, especially on a high heat. I see people make so many mistakes time and time again with their sweaters that they wash them too frequently, and they wash them on a high heat, and it ruins the fibers. So really, if you have a nice sweater, you don't need to wash it. Maybe once a season, twice a season at most. So yeah, I am saying wash your knits twice a year. That is actually what I am saying, because it's just not worth doing it for longer. Okay, so I'm kind of finishing up on this side. Do we have any more questions to come through? Okay, there isn't a hole yet. But I can tell the fabric is getting thin. Would I use this technique or another one? That's a really great question. In my Domestika course, I actually show you how to do a technique that helps you if your material is getting thin. And this is called duplicate stitch. And duplicate stitch is basically you imitate the stitch pattern underneath on the garment. So maybe I can show you very quickly what you would do. So it's called duplicate stitch, and it repairs the thin fabric. You basically add another stitch on top of the thin fabric, and it helps give it strength. So it's not for a hole. So this is obviously a mend for a hole. As you can see, we've done our mend now, and I'm really pleased with how it looks. And I love the running stitch on either side as well. And you can really play with this with different colors. And if we're going back to duplicate stitch, which somebody sent a question in about, I'm going to very, very quickly show you that stitch. It's also in my Domestika course. This is like a really nice little cute stitch that you can also use for decoration. Let me just show you quickly. So here you have these V stitches, as you can see on the knit. And what you want to do is you're going to kind of replicate these V stitches. So if I go in here, I can show you probably. you go in, this is a little bit small to be showing you. You go in through the middle and you go around the back, like so. You can create a small V here, and then you go back through the middle. And you just keep on going like that. Through the middle, around the back, and you create these really cute little V's, and these V's are going to strengthen your knit. And you can use them for decoration as well. People do these for decoration, which are really cute. And then you go back through and you start again here. And this is more like, it kind of feels like embroidery to me more than mending, but it is a really nice technique. Some people do this to add text, they do this to add strength. So as you can see there, can you see the V's that are building? So I'm following the same pattern as the mend. I'm not sure if you can see, hope you can. There we go. So, yeah, I show you exactly how to do this in my mending course, so you will have to join. So this is called duplicate stitch. And that's a really nice way to strengthen your knits as well. But that's a great question. Yeah, and each knit is slightly different and needs a little bit more kind of different types of care. Do we have any other questions? How big would be the biggest hole I could mend be? So yeah, this is also a really good point. So if we're talking about mending, sometimes really large holes can be really problematic, just because it's quite hard to manage a large hole. So this hole is quite large, I would say, but still, you know, this is an armpit hole. But if anything bigger than like kind of that size, I would say is quite difficult to mend, unless you're experienced. So if you want to have a go, I mean, there's no harm in having a go. You can always undo it or unpick it. But yeah, I would say anything that's about, I would say like the size of, you know, kind of a 2p coin. I know all of you are not, you're not British maybe, so you don't know what that is. But I would say, you know, try and keep it like, you know, about that size and maybe a little bit bigger, but nothing too big, because you can lose a lot of the feeling. You have to be quite experienced. But yeah, I mean, I often do mends on my elbows that are quite big. I often do mends that are probably about that big. But a good way to tackle large mends is by using a chunky yarn. So by a chunky yarn, I would mean something like this, and then you can really, really easily fill up the hole really, really fast, depending on the look that you want to go for. So here, the mend would build really fast like that, and you'd be able to fill it up really quickly. So yeah, use chunky yarn or don't make it too big. That's my advice. Do we have any other questions? Yes, so any sweater for its yarn. So old sweaters for their yarn. Yes, perfect. I love this question because I'm all about repurposing all materials. And if you find a beautiful sweater in a vintage store and you love it, but you don't like the design, take it home, buy it, because you can undo it for yarn, sorry. And the way that you can unravel it, it's actually called frogging. And this is something that I also do in my course. So in my Domestika course, you can watch me do this. So you have to be a little bit careful about where the knits are seamed up here. So you need to make sure that knits are often obviously knit in panels. So they're knit on the first panel. So you need to snip here and make an incision, and then you start to pull the yarn away. But I wouldn't do this with a thin jumper like this. I wouldn't use it for this because you'll be here all day. I would use it for something that's slightly chunkier. For example, I just have a million knits. This would be a better knit to frog because the yarn is thicker. So again, snip at the seam and then pull from there, and you should be able to get some really nice repurposed yarns. But yeah, that's a great question. And do we have any more questions before we finish for the day? Is there a fiber or knit you would not recommend mending? Actually, I don't think there is. I think that the whole purpose of mending is that it's a flexible and creative process that you can use to repair anything. And it's all up to you to develop different materials and develop your own techniques. Me personally, I don't mend with acrylic yarn. That's mainly because I don't knit with acrylic, and we don't use acrylic in the endery. We use kind of natural fibers. So but I'm not against using acrylic if it's repurposed and it needs a home, and I would definitely use it for a mending project, or I would use it for knitting as well, if need be. I know there are a lot of vegans that choose to use acrylic as opposed to animal fibers because it's against their ethics. So that's also fine and completely workable. Like I say, just try stuff out and find the best thing for you. I mean, some people also use embroidery floss for mending. So this is like a thinner, like embroidery floss. So this is something thin like this. You can also use this. This is cotton. And this is not wool. This is not, this is not a fiber, and people use stuff like this. So just have a go and have fun. That would be one of my main things. And just, post your pictures, get involved. There's a great mending community online, and, there's a lot of really great people out there doing really great work. So there's always kind of tips and tricks you can find, or you can actually watch my online course as well. We go into a lot of different questions about fibers and things like that. So I think we've got time maybe for one more question. Can I cover the back of my mending with adhesive fabric? I think you probably can, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would always stick with just kind of finishing it the way that I showed you, unless it's very detailed. But I think, if you want to cover it with fabric, I would say go for like a thin cotton layer, and I would stitch around it with your yarn. But the problem is that it can look, you can see it from the outside. So for example, if I had this patch and I put a piece of fabric underneath it, I think you'd be able to tell. The whole thing with knits is that they're elastic and that they move, and they have a lot of movement in them. So if you put something rigid on the back, like a thick denim or a thick piece of fabric, then you're not going to get that rigidity, you're not going to get that flexibility, and it's going to look a little bit, I would say, not that great. It's not going to hang well. The whole idea of mending is that it imitates the natural fiber, and it moves with the natural fiber, and that's what you want. So unless you really want to, I would say no. I would say stick with just keeping it simple. But people do use patches with knits as well. So patches of fabric you can use to mend, but I prefer to use this technique that I've just shown you, but there are lots of different ways you can try. So we've had some really, really great questions, and we've had a wonderful time. I've really enjoyed spending, an hour with you guys, talking about mending, talking about the endery, and I'm really, really excited to have sat down with Domestika and done like a really fun mend along. And I hope that you're going to find it useful when you're looking at what you have in your closet and you're moving over your wardrobes, maybe from spring to summer, or winter. Depending on where you live in the world. So I'm really, really excited to have shared this with you today, and happy mending, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Esto es lo que yo les voy a enseñar hoy día.
I'll be showing you guys how to finish this mask